When you struggle with your mental health, when you're pregnant or after you've had the baby, often you'll get a kind of general heading. Somebody will say, oh, it's postnatal anxiety or it's postnatal depression. Now, they might be right, but actually, if you can be more specific than that, then actually you have a better chance of finding the right kind of support and feeling a bit better understood. So we're going to do a rapid fire rundown of some of the most common ones. Depression. Depression is a very common thing that people experience, and it tends to be defined by hopelessness or helplessness. It's not about feeling sad all the time, which can be really confusing, because what you might feel instead is a lot of anxiety or a lot of anger or a lot of guilt or a lot of shame. And so you think, well, is that depression because I'm not feeling sad? The key thing is feeling hopeless or helpless. So I can't see a way out of this, or I don't feel like I've got the ability to get myself out of this. And that can make me feel really sort of weighed down and often quite flat and sort of heavy, and it's kind of hard to get myself to do stuff. That usually happens in response to losses. So if you've had a few losses, depression, and kind of feeling like I don't really know how I drag myself out of this now, it's a totally reasonable response to that. But also feeling ground down. So sometimes that's work that sort of grinds people down. Having a baby is often feeling quite ground down. It's physically exhausting. Your world becomes a bit smaller because it's harder to do stuff. And you might sort of day by day find yourself just find it a bit harder to get yourself to do things. And isolation. Isolation is definitely one of those things. A final thing I'd chuck in there is if you are somebody that often is sort of having a go at yourself for not doing things well enough, that can add to depression too, because it makes you feel like you're failing, whereas actually you might be doing a perfectly good job, but you feel that. Generalized anxiety. So this is one of the most common things that anybody ever deals with, but nobody knows this term. It's essentially defined by worrying about lots of different things. And the reason we worry about lots of different things is it's underpinned by a sense of responsibility for making sure that things work out, or high expectations, so always feeling like I might fail at something. Now, when you have a baby, there's so many different choices and there's so many different variables that go on that you might find yourself constantly thinking about which is the best thing to do. Should I be doing this? Why aren't they sort of rolling over yet? All that kind of stuff. And it's constant and exhausting. Health anxiety. This is characterised by lots of symptom checking, lots of focus, lots of worry about health, either for myself or for my baby. So that might be during pregnancy. I'm sort of checking my stomach a lot or wanting to check the baby's heartbeat, that kind of stuff. Perfectly reasonable response, particularly if you've had experience that can show you something could happen to you or your baby. So if you've had any health issues as you've gone along, that will really make that much more likely. OCD, just distressing intrusive thoughts. It's not about cleaning this, it's about distressing intrusive thoughts, which is really common after you've had a baby. So either harm to my baby, so you might have an image come into your head of something happening to your child, so you need to go and check on them, or you might have an image in your head of you doing something bad. So for example, I remember when one of my kids was really small, I stood at the top of the stairs with them, and I had an image of throwing them down the stairs. And that was really scary. It's perfectly normal to have intrusive thoughts. The only difference in OCD is we feel like there's something wrong with me for having that thought, so I try and stop it or I try and do something about it. And that's a loop that I get stuck in. Social anxiety, so judgment and attention. If you are already somebody that's quite self-conscious before you have a child, it might dial it up when you have a kid, because people are judgmental about it. If you try and go to a mum and baby group, you find it really hard because you feel like people are looking at you, or you feel, I don't know how I'm going to introduce myself to people. And then my world becomes smaller and smaller and smaller, and it starts to really get in my way. Finally, PTSD. PTSD is brought about by any event which feels like at that moment I was going to die. Either I was about to die or I felt I was about to die. And that actually is quite common during childbirth. If there's an emergency C-section or something like that, it's quite common for you to have had the feeling like, oh my God, is my baby going to survive? Am I going to survive? And you might find yourself being woken up by flashbacks or nightmares, being back there as if it's happening again. That's what PTSD is. So it's not all the same.